What are your thoughts? What makes a hot hatch?
The car needs to have some element of thrill to it. What creates thrill in somebody? It evokes their passion. And the only way you're going to evoke the passion is if the passion's put into the project in the first place. And unfortunately, that's where this car doesn't feel like it has that passion. That's what I think really sets the hot hatch apart is the fact that there's some element of surprise that, oh, it has the potential to do more in some regard. And I'll give you a great example. Let's go all the way back to the 1993 Honda Civic Del Sol VTEC. That's not a powerful car. I mean, 160 horsepower, right? You're running in the 15s in the quarter. But the thing is, you've got VTEC and you could rev it to 8,000 RPM, which was an extraordinary rev range, even by today's standards.
Sure.
So, you're looking 20 years ago. I'm sorry, 30 years ago. My gosh, 30 years ago for 93. But nonetheless, you're going back 30 years. You're revving a four-cylinder to 8,000 RPM. You're like, let's go. Let's push the limit, baby. This is new territory here. And that is what is the element of surprise that evokes the thrill, that pulls the passion out of the driver because the engineers put the passion into the project themselves, and you make that connection.
I like that. I like that example too. I like the thrill. Many of the Hondas, right, of the 90s and 2000s, they're kind of slow, but they did have that thrill, I think, with the screaming, and they were relatively quick for their time, I guess, with very low horsepower usually, or maybe an okay horsepower, very little torque.
All our friends who had Hondas, and the whole rave was about VTEC because it was this surprise. You go in the RPMs and it's climbing normally. All of a sudden, boom, you get this pull and out to an extended rev range, and it's not a turbocharged car. So that surprised the automotive community as a whole.
My old Honda Accord had a 2.4 cylinder and it had VTEC, and it was so slow, right? It was such a slow car. But the one thing that was kind of fun about it, if you floored it and you got to where the VTEC kicked in, right, it opened up, it kind of made it a little thrilling. But I think beyond the GTI, there are other cars that are starting to miss that piece about how some of the 90s cars were really crappy, right? The interiors were really crappy, and they were kind of transitioning from the V8s and V6s to these mostly crappy four-cylinders or crappy V6s. And I wonder if we're kind of in this, I think you mentioned, we're kind of in this transition period, the 11th generation Honda Accord. It seems like it's also missing something for that 5% of enthusiasts or 7% of the enthusiasts who liked having, maybe the manual, it's so niche now that not too many people are buying. It's really designed for, the families. You can fit a lot of people in there. It's got a ton of legroom. You can put car seats in the back, but they always made that Accord with a V6. And then even like my generation with a 2-liter, the 2.0T from the Type R, a little crazy, right, for a car like that. I think of like the Ford SHO, the early, in the 80s, same thing, right? It was like that Yamaha 3-liter V6, I think it was. And I feel like we're missing that. We don't have that in many of the cars. Everybody's kind of moved on into these crossovers and SUVs, and it is a little disappointing in that way. What do you think? Do you have any cars like that? Like, do you have anything that like you can think of other cars that are similar that maybe miss some of that thrill or passion?
The Cadillac CTS. The V used to be the performance model, and now you got to get the V Blackwing, right? And it's like, well, why did we create this intermediary here? And again, to open up flavors for more people to capitalize on market share. That's why I feel like they're doing it.
And now we get M3 competition, right? Like, oh, you can have an M3 or a M5, but that's not the top dog anymore. Now you have to get the little under X3 or M3. It says competition. You can pay a little bit more to get that full craziness, right?
It feels like they're selling out on the namesake a little bit.
Yeah, it's diluting it, right?
Yeah. One other one that comes to mind too is Mercedes with some of their AMGs, but it's not really an AMG model. Like when you tell me AMG, that's a high horsepower engine. And now it's kind of like, oh, we'll put the AMG on there for the name sake, not for the performance sake as it used to be. And that's unfortunate.
Isn't the new C-Class a 4-cylinder? No, I'm sorry. The AMG is a hybrid, and it's like a 2-liter 4-cylinder with 400 something horsepower. And then the electric motor kicks in. You're right. It does feel like these badges are getting diluted now. And, you just see a lot of them. Like just because you have the M car doesn't even mean you have the fastest one. You have to find that competition underneath. And I don't know, there might be competition in plus. I don't know.
Yeah. Like with cell phones, Mega Ultra Plus Pro, right? They just keep adding on all of these layers. What we're talking about with this transition period, I think we could take that in a separate video. Leave the comment and we'll go ahead and address that if we have enough feedback and interest.
But the reason I like to get a car that's a little bit, right, that crazy, that thrilling car is so I don't have to tune it, so I can have that reliability and I can have that peace of mind. When you change things aftermarket, that's a different conversation. I have a feeling, Chris, you're going to get a lot of folks telling you to tune your car.
And you bring up a great point too. The performance can definitely be unlocked by tuning. I definitely think if you have a GTI and you love the car, and if you are experiencing this underwhelming performance, that's something you'll have to weigh, because of course it could likely void your warranty if you do that, which is unfortunate because you're paying for something that, as advertised by the numbers, should be pretty good. And if it's not meeting that criteria for you to go and explore additional measures, well, it could feel kind of burdensome. And you know what? We could tailor that to another future discussion on car manufacturers and the fact that they want to charge subscriptions for options on the vehicle. Drop a comment down below if you want to hear a discussion between me and Paul on more on that. Here's some car test driving advice I have that I'm going to incorporate that I just learned after doing this whole thing. Beyond just accelerating off the line, when you're out test driving a car now, put it in second gear on the low RPM, 20 miles per hour, full throttle, see if it delivers as expected. See if it's not just something that's only set up for testing purposes to satisfy the numbers. See if it could accelerate as practical when the car is fully warm and you've got the permission to do these things. I would encourage this to put this in your toolbox.
And we can have another discussion on the speed that currently a lot of these cars, especially the electric cars, the level of performance you can get in like crossovers of 3 seconds, 0 to 60 or lower. Do we really need that? Like, is that just, are these cars just being built to impress car and driver? Or is that something that people actually use in daily life? And is it going to be dangerous, especially as these cars get less expensive because it's cheap horsepower and inexperienced hands? Maybe that's another discussion we could have.
With great power comes great responsibility. How much power for how responsible you
My
are.
mom said, I won't be able to handle the V8, right?
Good point. Well, thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate your involvement here. I think we had a great discussion. I look forward to future ones with you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, and good luck.
Thank you for watching. Check out this short that will reignite your interest in the Pontiac Firebird.